Welcome to The Fighter with Kris Sims. I am Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. At the Taxpayers Federation, we are always fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. And so, yesterday's budget, those are big days for us. And we have got a special show for you today. It's extra long and it's happening on an extra day because this thing's costing you a lot extra, and I'm really sorry. What you're about to watch is going to be a little painful. First, I did have some housekeeping to go through here really quick. As of the recording of this show, there has been one member of parliament who has crossed the floor from the official opposition, the Conservatives, over to the government officially. So now this member of parliament who recently ran as a Conservative in Nova Scotia, is now joining the Liberal government of Mark Carney just a few months after the election. We have some brand new tape here of Prime Minister Mark Carney talking about this floor crossing. Let's listen.
I'd like to thank Chris D'Entremont, the Member for Parliament for Acadie, Annapolis. I'm honored to welcome him as the newest member of our Government Caucus. Chris's decision to join the Government Caucus at this crucial moment for our country is exceptionally valuable and important.
So for folks who don't know where that region of Nova Scotia is, that is over on what is the west side of Nova Scotia. It's up and over in the Annapolis Valley. That is where a major university is located in Wolfville. So there you have it. Now, I gotta say, I love Alberta. I love a million things about living in the province of Alberta. One of the best things about living in the province of Alberta is its sense of direct democracy. Like every time you go out on a Thursday night around here, you're gonna trip over some activist group, somebody who's involved, okay, in their local politics, in provincial politics. And one of the mechanisms we have here in Alberta is for direct democracy, and it is called recall legislation. What is recall legislation, you may ask? Well, in the province of British Columbia, they have it at the provincial level. In the province of Alberta, we have it at the provincial, municipal, and school board level. Meaning, if any politician starts screwing up so badly that enough of his or her constituents, the folks who voted for them in their riding or their ward, sign a petition, they will then trigger a by-election. And then that MLA or that city councillor, that mayor or that school board trustee has a choice. He or she can either rerun to keep their job or they can bow out of that by-election. It can go both ways, but it is a darn good mechanism. It is a very good tool to have in that democracy toolbox. And it's one of the reasons why the Taxpayers Federation, we think you should have recall legislation at the federal level. So stay tuned to Juno News throughout the day. We will have updates on what is happening with the soap opera that is up on Parliament Hill, where politicians get together with bureaucrats and decide on how to best waste your money. Speaking of which, the federal budget came down yesterday, and I'm just going to level with you. It kind of took me off guard. I knew it was going to be bad. But when I was initially looking at the top line numbers, I thought that it was about $10 billion less bad than what the parliamentary budget officer was warning about. But I was wrong. It's $10 billion worse than what the PBO was warning about. Remember when he was saying, the government watchdog on the budget was saying that this is unsustainable and stupefying? It's $10 billion worse than that. And I'm sorry to be the deliverer of this news. I almost cried when I saw that number. Conservative leader, opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre did a great job holding the government to account and sticking to the numbers on this budget. Let's listen to the damage.
The Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID. The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else that Canadians buy. And the Prime Minister has broken every single promise he made just 7 short months ago. He promised a $62 billion deficit. He delivered nearly an $80 billion deficit, $16 billion bigger than he promised and twice the size that his predecessor left behind. He promised to spend less. He's spending $90 billion more, costing $5,400 per family in Canada. And that $90 billion, to the Prime Minister's heckles, is above and beyond the promised $16 billion that he says he will one day find. And if he doesn't find them, it will be over $100 billion in brand new spending. This costly budget forces Canadians to spend more on debt interest than on health care transfers. Wow. More than the government collects in GST. That means every dollar the Canadians pay in GST will go to bankers and bondholders instead of to doctors and nurses.
So those numbers that he was talking about there, those are in the budget. That's the math, okay? Sean, if you want to pull up that board, I think it's really important for us to look at the actual grim numbers here. And I know this is not fun, guys, but we need to be the adults in the room here because the government isn't going to be. So we need to go through this, okay? It's like an autopsy, okay? So the deficit this year, meaning how much more they're spending than they are taking in, more than $78 billion. The debt by the end of this fiscal year is going to be $1.3 trillion. A trillion, folks, is a 1 with 12 zeros after it. 1 trillion is such a big number. If you started counting right now, it would take you 30,000 years to count to 1 trillion. The debt interest this year, like this year alone, the same way that you would add up the interest you're paying on, say, your line of credit or a credit card, the debt interest this year is costing Canadian taxpayers more than $55 billion. I'll put it this way. If you take a look at debt interest, okay, this is not just some weird term that's like buried somehow in the budget and you don't really pay it and it's fungible, marginal, blah, 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 okay? No, this is not some economics nerd trick, okay? The debt interest is actually paid every year by you, by me, by all of us taxpayers. And what we are spending on debt interest is more than $1 billion a week. A week. I'll put it this way, another way. It costs about $1 billion to build a brand new hospital. Okay? All the paint and the lights and the chrome and the fancy doors. Okay? About $1 billion. What we are spending on debt interest is like burning down a new hospital every week. So unfortunately, remember how earlier we were wondering which will be the real Mark Carney? Will he please stand up? Right? Well, I really wish that this budget were more slim than it is shady, but it's super shady. And the real Mark Carney is unfortunately this guy who wrote this book, Values, while he was the UN special envoy to blah, blah, blah. It's not the guy who ran in an election on being the smart guy with money, on being fiscally responsible. This government is blowing the budget. It's spending money worse than Trudeau. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Okay? So it's up to all of us to now hold our members of parliament to account. Now, at the Taxpayers Federation, we don't just cover budgets. Okay? We don't just calculate how much the debt interest is going to cost you per week, all that stuff. That's all really important. We're going to get to that in a second. But remember, one of our big fights was the carbon tax. And it's because of tax fighters like you that we're not paying the consumer carbon tax anymore. Thank goodness. So that's gone. But this is the big one. Carney is still pushing through his big hidden industrial carbon tax. I combed through that budget as fast as I could. It could still be in there. The number for the industrial carbon tax and how much it's going to cost you, I can't find it, but it's in there. He mentions it repeatedly that this is going to be a structural element of our economy going forward for decades and decades. Yay! It's all through this book where he talks about his love for carbon taxes. Carney goes on and on about it. Interesting, Pierre Poilievre, he also noticed that this budget rattles on and on about how awesome an industrial carbon tax is. Listen to this.
He raises the industrial carbon tax on farm equipment and fertilizer, and therefore food, on steel, concrete, and other industrial projects needed to build homes, a big tax increases on homes and food.
So Poilievre's right there. We just don't know how much it's going to cost. Okay, so it's mentioned there all through there that they've got, benchmarks and backstops and all that stuff. Remember all that talk during the regular carbon tax? It's back, and it's in hidden industrial carbon tax form. So this is going to cost you big time. We're still trying to calculate how much. I also wanted to do a quick flag here for the Alberta government to watch out for, because in this budget, for some reason, they're rattling on about their so-called emissions cap. Okay, what it actually is an oil and gas production cap. Okay, it is the boot on the throat, okay, of Alberta's oil and gas sector. Okay, along with Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines Act, along with the West Coast tanker ban. Okay, the production cap on Alberta's oil and gas is a huge strangulation of the Canadian economy and of Alberta in particular. It mentions it in the budget, but doesn't say it's getting rid of it. It's like, oh, because of technology in the future, and maybe someday we'll hit our metrics and have a meeting and we won't need it anymore, blah, blah, blah. There's a reason why this budget isn't the 5 pages that we actually need, and instead is 498 pages long, and it is brutally overspending your money. How much are they spending? What are they spending the money on? And how on earth do we dig ourselves out of this ocean of red ink and debt? Let's find out. Joining me now is my good friend of this program, Franco Terrazzano. He is our federal director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And Franco was in the middle of what we call the budget lockup yesterday, looking at all of the gory details. Franco, I got to admit, when you and I were talking about this yesterday, the actual deficit kind of took me off guard. I thought it was a little bit less bad than what the PBO had said, but it's worse. How can it be worse?
Well, it's a debt disaster, and debt is spiraling out of control because spending is spiraling out of control. I mean, look, welcome to Canada, folks, where every dollar you pay in federal sales tax is going to pay interest on the debt. Let that sink in the next time you're waiting in the checkout line. Hey, folks, or think about it this way. The federal government is now wasting more money paying interest on the debt than what it sends to the provinces in healthcare transfers. And I just want to make a statement right now. We need a sense of urgency, okay? The smoke is up, okay? We can't wait until the fire engulfs the whole kitchen. We got to put the smoke out now. So this is a call both to the Liberal government, Prime Minister Mark Carney, but also the opposition parties. Look, the Conservatives have been pretty good calling for lower spending, but the urgency needs to be cranked up. This is a serious problem.
It is. But I don't know if they're getting it, man. We just got a brand new clip from Prime Minister Mark Carney where he's talking about fiscal responsibility. Listen to this.
We've put forward to the House a plan that meets the moment, that manages the federal finances in a prudent, responsible, pragmatic way, gets spending down, and creates this prospect of investment on a scale that we haven't seen for generations.
So, Franco, I don't know what you're going on about, man, because he just said prudent, responsible, and that he has spending down. What's going on?
Yeah, spending down? What is going on? Has he read the budget? Okay, the government is going to spend $581 billion this year. $581 billion this year. That's a $38 billion spending increase in 1 year. Okay, remember Trudeau? I know you don't want to think about him, but we all know Trudeau was wasting money like crazy, reckless, out of control spending. The government, under Carney, is spending $38 billion more than what Trudeau spent last year. Right? Carney was supposed to be the economic guru, right? The man with the plan to clean up Canada's economic mess. I mean, he's throwing fuel on the fire here.
Yeah.
$38 billion spending increase in 1 year. And guess what, folks? Mr. Carney, in this budget, plans to spend billions of dollars more every single year.
what blows my mind, Franco, is that one of my radio hosts that I'm on with every week refers to the former prime minister now as Katy Perry's boyfriend. So Carney, the guy with the PhD from Oxford in economics, is managing money worse than Katy Perry's boyfriend. Like, are we in the Twilight Zone here? Like, seriously, you're in Ottawa, okay? You walk around those streets, you go to those coffee shops, you kind of hear the buzz. Why are they not getting this? Like, why is the math not mathing? Like, what is it about this message that these liberals, this current liberal government, because this is not Paul Martin's liberal government by a long shot. What is with this current liberal government not getting budgeting?
Yeah, the party's supposed to be over, but the party is raging on.
Yeah.
Right? And like, look, like, it's just absolutely pure spin. I mean, look, like, the government is trying to claim it's saving around $60 billion. Well, a couple things there. Number one, when you're increasing spending billions of dollars every single year, you're saving money wrong. Like, that's not how saving money works when you're spending billions of dollars more every year. But number two, guess what? If you go through the budget documents, folks, you'll notice one thing sticks out to you, okay? And that's this, that all of the savings all happen in future years, right? When have we heard that before? Oh, don't worry, folks. Just a couple small deficits and we'll balance the budget in 4 years. Oh, don't worry, folks. We'll find $15 billion of savings in a few years. Yeah, all of that happened under Trudeau, and it looks like Carney is doing the exact same plan. Look, here is the big problem, okay? The government always promises to go on a diet Monday, and then Monday never comes. There is no real savings in this budget, just billions of dollars more spending, more borrowing, and Carney is continuing Trudeau's debt-fueled spending spree.
We've got some hard numbers here in black, white, and red, and red is the suitable color here. Sean, if you want to pull up that board, please, that you made for us, and you can look here at what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with a deficit of more than $78 billion. For folks who are following along with at home, a billion is 1,000 million. A billion is a number with at least, nine zeros after it, or 9 digits after it. Our debt. So am I correct here? At the end of this fiscal year, our debt's going to hit more than 1.3 trillion, Franco?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, 100%. And like, the interest charges there are $56 billion. That's this year. By 2029, debt interest charges are going to blow a $76 billion hole in the budget. This is bad.
Okay.
Like, folks, this is really bad. And like, look, this is like, the government has to be urgent about this. Okay. I mean, just ask the Saskatchewan NDP what happens when debt interest charges balloon out of control. Remember back in the 90s, you even had the NDP in Saskatchewan that was forced to close down dozens of hospitals across that prairie province. Like, the government has to be urgent. And like, things are too far gone now. So we got to call it the government. And I'm also going to shift gears and talk about the official opposition. Now,
please,
to the Conservative Party's credit, they have started talking about lowering the deficit, cutting some spending. They've even said that we got to find big savings in the bureaucracy. But we need all MPs, including opposition parties, to be like, no. The time for spending restraint is gone.
Yeah.
We need big time spending cuts now. Look, the Carney government should have fired at least 40,000 bureaucrats yesterday. Right? This is at the point that we are now, where the federal government over the last decade added 100,000 extra federal paper pushers. We can't talk about attrition anymore. We can't talk about just, tinkering on the margins. No, we have to fire bureaucrats in Ottawa.
Can you make this real for taxpayers? Because I think sometimes when people hear, okay, $50 billion plus $50 billion a year in interest payments out the door, I think sometimes that number is so big and the budget is like flipping 498 pages long. It can get so dense that they're like, oh, okay, maybe that's some sort of marginal thing, or I don't know. But this is taxpayers' money being spent on interest payments, right? Like, this is money out of your wallet every year on interest, correct?
Debt interest charges are costing each Canadian about $1,300 this year. Okay? That's not $1,300 this year taken from your wallet to pay for services or to even pay down the debt. No, the government is taking $1,300 from you this year alone just to make interest payments on the debt.
Folks, it's more than $1 billion a week, okay? And I want you to visualize this. Building a brand new hospital with all the paint and the chrome and the windows and stuff costs about $1 billion. So if we're blowing through $1 billion a week on debt interest payments, I want you to picture every Saturday night, we all gather around the television set and we burn down a new hospital every week. That's what we're wasting just on debt interest. That is why Franco and I got our blood pressure up a little bit here, because this is critical. Franco, you did the math on this a while ago and it still blows my mind. Can you walk us through what if back in 2015, when the guy with the fancy socks who was fiscally illiterate, and I don't even feel like picking on him anymore because Carney's spending money worse than he was. So amazing. But back when he took over in 2015, when Trudeau was prime minister, starting then, if we had simply kept pace with population growth for our bureaucracy, if we had grown the bureaucracy at the same rate as population, how much money would we be saving?
More than $7 billion a year. Like, and folks, like, think about that, right? Like, everyone knows that Canada's population boomed.
Yep.
The bureaucracy increased by like more than double. Like, what is going on here, folks? And like, yeah, like, sorry, we're getting kind of upset, but this is some real serious stuff. Like, we are at the point, like I said, it's not just about restraint anymore. No, the time for the scalpel is over. We need a chainsaw. Yeah. Right? Abolish the CBC, sell the failing crown corporations like Canada Post, Via Rail hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. I'm talking about firing tens of thousands of bureaucrats. That is what has to happen. And not tomorrow, not 3 years from now, not 4 years from now. ASAP. Like, this has to happen now. Okay, we need major cuts. Look at all the money being spent through foreign aid, right? The last year I looked, the federal government was spending about $11 billion on foreign aid. Okay, so that means that the federal government spent almost twice as much on foreign aid as what it spent through the entire Department of Veterans Affairs.
I want to underline that, because for those of us of a certain vintage, when we hear foreign aid, we might remember terrible images from the 80s of, kids who are hungry and they need food, et cetera, et cetera. No. That is not what we're talking about. Under the auspices of foreign aid, aren't we handing out a ridiculous amount of money for the stupidest things possible? Like, is this where we're also handing out money for whatever that was, like gender neutral rice in Vietnam or something? Is that under the umbrella of foreign aid, or is that under some other umbrella?
I mean, who cares what umbrella it's under? I mean, it's wasted money overseas, right? Yeah. It's taking money from Canadian taxpayers and wasting it overseas. You mentioned that gender just rice, whatever that, I don't even know. I'm not
remember.
Sure. Okay. $8,800 on a sex toy show in Germany. Kris, what's the name of that show?
Can't remember.
Okay. $12,000 for seniors in other countries that talk about their sex lives in front of live audiences. So the government is essentially outsourcing old people sex stories now. Welcome to Canada's economy. Or how about this one, right? And this one hits close to home, where you have countless Canadians waiting in pain, sometimes for years, to get a hip replacement. Meanwhile, the government is dishing $7 million to the Philippines for like gender responsive universal health care over there. Like, what? Are you kidding me?
I know.
Like, look outside the street. People are struggling.
I know.
And the government is absolutely broke. And speaking about the government being broke, like, in this budget, right, Carney is borrowing about $80 billion this year. And yet he has $150 million extra for CBC?
Yeah.
Eurovision? Like, isn't that like a Will Smith movie? Like, what is, like, not Will Smith. I'm thinking about the catcher from the Dodgers. Will Ferrell didn't he do like a Eurovision bad movie like a couple years ago? Anywho's, I digress. What about this? $100 million for FIFA?
Yeah.
For a soccer tournament?
Yeah. So FIFA is apparently about, soccer. And we're wasting money on that. We are handing $150 million more out to the CBC. I will point out that was announced earlier this year that the state broadcaster is going to be getting $150 million more. When? Oh, I don't know. Around the federal election. Weird how that happens, eh? Like, okay, journalists should never be paid by the government. I don't care if it's Don Cherry or Rosemary Barton. Okay, journalists should never be paid by the government because we need a free press. This is free from government. And to that point on Eurovision, I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I'm going to land on this point, Franco. I was scrolling through that budget as fast and hard as I could because I was looking for some numbers attached to the industrial carbon tax. It's listed in there. I couldn't find any numbers yet, but I'm going to keep looking. That stupid, bloated budget is more than 400 pages long. And I'm just going to say it. Pull up that board one more time, Sean, please, if you can. Okay, this is what needs to be in a budget. Maybe a little bit more, but not much more than that, okay? It does not have to be 400 pages long, and the government has no business imagining their debut at Eurovision, which I think that's like Star Search in Europe. I got a pretty good grade in geography, but you don't have to be a map whiz to know Canada's not in Europe. Like last I checked, I think there's a big pond between us, isn't there, Franco? This gets to my point of how do we drill home this message of severity and seriousness to a government who clearly isn't taking their budget seriously? If they're spitballing ideas about being a contestant in Eurovision, like how do we push them?
Well, look, the parliamentary budget officer is the government's own independent and nonpartisan budget watchdog, right? Just by the numbers, just shooting it straight. Well, about a month ago, the PBO released this report that projected the deficit this year to be about $68 billion, right? So about $10 billion less than what the actual deficit is. And then the PBO goes on committee, and I thought the PBO did excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
He did.
And he used words like stupefying, shocking, unsustainable. Something is going to break. That was from the government's own independent budget watchdog. That wasn't the Canadian Taxpayers Federation at committee. This was the parliamentary budget officer. And his deficit projections were lower than the actual deficit. And he's using words like unsustainable. Something is going to break. So this is very bad. This is very urgent. And Kris, let me just go. Look, for Canadians out there listening or watching this show, here's what you have to know. This is important for you because you got to cut through the spin. Because Carney's talking about spending less. He's not spending less. He's spending $38 billion more this year, billions of dollars more years into the future. We are not on a good fiscal track. Are you kidding me? Borrowing $80 billion, no plan to balance the budget ever, borrowing tens of billions of dollars as long as the eye can see? No. Like, it's up to Canadians, up to you, Kris, up to people who are watching or listening in the show to cut through the spin and demand not fiscal restraint, not a scalpel, to demand the chainsaw.
Yeah. Yeah, we need it. I got to ask you, because Franco isn't just a great communicator. He also has his degree in economics. So I lean on him for some of these terms. Does it matter, legit, does it matter if the government is splitting between operating budget and capital budget?
This is all debt that has to pay back, that has to be paid back.
Okay.
None of this is, okay, so a couple things. None of this is happening in a vacuum either, folks, right? It's not like the government had been running balanced budgets for the last 10 years. No, the government just doubled the debt in 10 years. And now you're adding another $80 billion to the debt in 1 year? Like, are you kidding me? Interest charges more than what the government is sending to healthcare? Like, no, at this point, if Carney has these new priorities, then he has to cut massively elsewhere. You can't just keep spending more money on everything forever. Right? But the second thing, Kris, this ties home, okay? Look, what Carney is doing is essentially the same as what Trudeau did for the last 10 years, right? Trudeau talked about investment. What were the tens of billions of dollars in corporate welfare to multinational corporations to build battery factories, right? Trudeau used the terms investment. Look, we already tried this failed experiment, right? The government already tried to borrow its way to prosperity. And what happened? The experiment failed. We got 40-year high inflation where Canadians can't afford the necessities of life. We have a stagnating economy. Been there, done that.
Does it matter, lastly, if Carney is calling this investing or spending? Like when it comes to like the international smart people, okay, with their calculators who are figuring stuff out like what they're going to have our credit rating at as a country. Does it matter if Carney is calling what he's doing investing or spending? Because you're helping people cut through the spin here. When they're sitting there listening to these people talk, okay, especially on mainstream media, we'll point out, we can't let them skate. So is there a difference between investment and spending?
It's a better word that politicians like to use. That's it. Like, I don't know what the bond fund managers are going to do, or the credit rating agencies are going to do. I have no idea.
Okay.
But I do know that this is massively worrying for three reasons, Kris. Let me just say them real quick. Number one, as interest charges spiral out of control, the government's taking more tax dollars from you for awful services, because more and more of your money has to go to pay the interest on the federal government's debt. Number two, guess what? Business and investors look at these massive deficits, and what does that signal to them? Tax hikes in the future, right? That makes them less likely to actually set up shop in Canada, create jobs, and create investment for our Canadian economy. Okay, that's number two. Number three, massive deficits, especially when they're financed by the money printer like they were during the pandemic, leads to massive inflation. Okay, so the three scenarios that can come out of this is worse services as more money goes to pay interest on the debt. Okay, a worse economic opportunity as more businesses decide not to set up shop here in Canada because there's going to be future tax hikes down the road. And number three, higher inflation. A worse economy, higher inflation, worse federal government services, if that's even possible.
Okay, it's a 5-alarm fire, folks. I wish we had better news for you, but if I'm going to get bad news, I want Franco to deliver it. Franco, thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry for being the rain cloud.
Nah, it's all right, man. All right, that's once again Franco Terrazzano. He is the federal director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He, of course, is stationed in Ottawa, and he was right in there during the lockup reading the budget. And we've been talking leading up to this budget a lot. And speaking personally, I was wondering which Prime Minister Mark Carney was going to emerge from this. Because so far, we've been told a tale of two men. We've been told one tale, that he's got a PhD in economics from Oxford, super smart dude, knows how to handle money. He understands all of the mathing that needs to happen here, okay? He was the head of the Bank of Canada, was the head of the Bank of England. Things are going to change. It's not going to be, fancy socks and, silly trips anymore. And then there's the other guy who wrote this book. And if you have not listened to this book or read it yet, it's called Values. It is by Mark Carney. It's endorsed by Bono. And Carney references Greta Thunberg throughout this book many times. I strongly recommend you read this thing, because he wrote this when he was the UN Special Envoy on blah, blah, blah. And I went through the budget as fast as I could, and I'm going to be reading about it a lot later today. I was looking for a number for the industrial carbon tax. And I was trying to find the numbers that he was anticipating for carbon tax tariffs, which he campaigned on, okay? And this is the guy. It's not the economics guy that people were hoping was going to actually drastically reduce the size and cost of our bureaucracy. It's not actually the guy that looks at the bottom line of the balance sheet and says, holy smokes, this is awful. We're going to work as hard and fast as we can to balance this budget for realsies. And we're going to slay the deficit the way previous Liberal governments did back in the mid-1990s. Nope, that guy's nowhere to be found, if he ever existed, okay? This guy's prime minister, okay? Because there's language all through that budget, which is 498 pages long, that has no business being in a budget. Like, the budget is supposed to be some simple numbers, okay? It's supposed to show you how much extra money you're putting on the debt or what your balance is, okay? Are you in deficit or are you in surplus? That should be a number. The total debt should be that number on there too. And what you're spending on debt servicing costs, also known as interest payments on the debt, that should be the number, okay? So revenue, money coming in. Expenditures, money going out. Deficit or surplus, check. And cost of the debt. Those are basically the four graphs that need to be in a major federal budget. Give or take a few paragraphs in there. But no, it's like 498 pages long. I will point out that he mentions industrial carbon taxes a lot in the budget. The problem and the catch is he doesn't say, as far as I can see, how much it's going to cost you yet. They're going to be there. They're going to be bigger. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be around for decades. He is baking it into our economy. He also mentioned the so-called emissions cap. I'm going to flag this for Alberta because it's not just Alberta. Alberta is the engine of the Canadian economy, and they are dumping ashes in it. They are choking it off as hard and fast as they can because they mentioned the so-called emissions cap, which is really just a production cap on oil and gas. The problem is they use that weird, squishy, futuristic language of maybe someday in the future there will be technology, blah, 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 and we can have a meeting and then maybe we won't even need the cap. They didn't come out and say the cap is gone. Bill C-69 is gone. No more pipelines. The ban on West Coast tankers, that's gone too. We're going to get serious. We're going to start getting our natural resources to boom. None of that language is in the budget. Okay? It's a bunch of big government, expensive, squishy nonsense. So we need to figure out what got us here. Okay? What mistakes have we made in the past in our thinking, okay, that has led us up to this point? And how on earth do we climb our way out of this ocean of red ink of debt? Let's find out. Joining me now is Dr. John Robson. He is the Executive Director of the Climate Discussion Nexus and one of my very longtime friends. I know this term gets thrown around a lot lately, but he is indeed my favorite historian. Dr. Robson, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
It was not a pleasure yesterday looking at this budget. And you and I have had many long conversations about thoughtful things. And I got to tell you, I left reading some of this budget wondering, John, do these folks think that money isn't real? Like it's a social construct and that it doesn't matter? What's your take on this budget?
It soon will be. I actually hate federal budgets. When my editor said, "Can you go into the lockup?" I was thinking, "What have I done to you now?" Because it starts with the title is Canada Strong, and then there's a picture of a ship. It's like, what is this ship? What's this got to do with anything? And what it should say is Canada's budget. And then you should open it and should say, here's how much we think we're going to spend next year. Here's the amount we hope to take in. And here's the already troubling gap between the two. Instead, you get a whole bunch of self-inflating gooblehoy about transformative this and catalyze that and optimize the other. A bunch of abstract verbiage that plays well at Davos, but that doesn't have much of anything to do with the real world. And this, of course, has worked for a long time for these people. They talk that way, like they play this glass bead game, and they succeed. Mark Carney became fabulously wealthy saying nothing in this manner. But at some point, we need a budget. And again, we insiders know that you search summary statement of transactions. I noted in my National Post column that the finance minister gabbles, this is a budget that talks to everyday Canadians. Really? You think they talk like that? But we know, search summary statement of transactions are on page 248. They finally get to, here's what we're going to spend, here's what we hope to take in, here's what we think we're going to borrow. And what we think we're going to borrow is $78.3 billion. That's the big picture. And then another reason I hate all this stuff is because then I get all these press releases from groups saying, oh, this was a great budget. We got money. Or this was an okay budget. We got some money, but we want more money. Or this is an awful budget. We didn't get money. Whereas the key question ought to be, what are they doing to our country? What are they doing to all of us? Because I found one of these just illustrative. The Royal Canadian Geographic Society applauds Prime Minister Carney's first budget, saying this is proof our elbows are up. No, it's proof that spending is up. But they say they applaud the Government of Canada's commitment to strengthening national identity and unity through geographic education and storytelling. So it doesn't matter that they're bankrupting the country. We're getting plunder in the short run. I mean, Cicero's warning about democracy only lasting until they discover vote's the key to the treasury. So my look at this is the debt is going up. Spending is going up. And then you get that shtick where the deficit goes down 2 years from now. Yeah, sure it does. I remember when Brian Mulroney said that would happen.
And then it's so mendacious. The language in which it's couched is so removed from a world in which you can't get the CRA on the phone, but why would you want to? Because what they tell you is always wrong. Or when they spread up this vaunted dental benefit and then they paid a bunch of money to people who weren't eligible. I mean, this is the organization that has StatsCan and our tax records. How do they not know who's eligible? They can't do anything. They can't buy military equipment. We have a crisis of competence in this country, and the government is on the verge of insolvency. But when you read this budget, there is no hint that this is going on. And if you look at most of the commentary on it, I sit in the lock looking at my fellow journalists and wondering what planet they came from and which one they're going back to when it's all over. Because they'll talk about, oh, so they've removed the luxury tax on yachts. And of course, it's important what's in the tax code. But a budget isn't about little fiddles and who has a tiny win and who has a bitter loss. It's about what is happening to our long-term prospects, because growth in productivity, investment, all of that stuff depends upon low and simple taxes, clear, effective, appropriate regulations, and the government getting the heck out of the way and unleashing the energy of private citizens. And this budget has nothing to do with any of that. But when you look at the talk shows and the learned commentary, you just get the feeling that nobody understands the process inside or even outside the government.
I agree. Just to rewind the tape a little, did that news release actually say our elbows are up?
That's what that one said. I was quoting. When I want to really give somebody the knucklebone shampoo, I don't paraphrase. That's not fair. I give their words. Over at the Climate Discussion Nexus, people chide me because I'm always saying, and they said quote, and then I read it and they say unquote. But the point is, if you're going to go after somebody for what they said, you should go after them for what they really said. Yep. Speaking of which, I want to point out a couple of things in the budget that are just absolutely, to me, astronomically deceitful. And I wonder if anybody else is paying attention. And this is on page 7, so they didn't hide this one. There's a chart growing our economy by spending less to invest more. And spending is when the government takes money and spends it, and investment is when the government takes money and spends it. But here, apparently, the theory is spending is on dumb stuff and investment's on wise stuff. And we're meant to believe they know the difference. They just never told us or did anything about it till now. But then the legend is percent of deficit. And they have this lovely teal line showing that capital investments will go from 58% of the deficit to 100% within 5 years, and day-to-day operating spending will drop to 0% of the deficit. So they're not running a deficit on day-to-day operating spending. Well, isn't that thoughtful of them? No, and there's no social programs not even on the chart, which of course is where most of the money goes. So that's already a lie. But here's the big thing. These various expenditures are not tied to specific revenue sources. So there is no way of knowing how much of the deficit came from this or from that. If operating spending is 60% and capital investments 40%, then 60% of the deficit comes from the former and 40% from the latter, just as 60% of the money you actually got is spent on the former and 40% on the latter. This is absolutely, it's just lying with mathiness. And there are two possibilities. One is they're lying to you on purpose and they're rogues. The other one is they don't even know that what they're saying is gibberish and they're fools. And of course, the two are not mutually exclusive. But this is such a deceitful budget. And reading it doesn't tell you anything you need to know about the national finances. Or this chart, 42% of budget 2025 is to strengthen Canadian sovereignty, and 36% is to bring down costs for Canadians. Now, does that mean 42% of spending is to strengthen Canadian sovereignty? No, it's 42% of some weird assessment of changes. And then it's done in teal. Teal's a good color. Nice work, Cobbs. But here, what's in bringing down costs for Canadians? 36%, 10 billion, is middle class. So this is the light blue. Middle class tax cut, canceling the consumer carbon price, build Canada homes. Protecting our sovereignty, 42%, 12 billion, is investing in defense, tariff response, and building a strong economy, which is like insects, numbness, and counting things in base 12, right? These are three things that bear no relationship to one another whatsoever. And they're lumped together because you get a pie chart in three contemporary colors. This is not an attempt to level with us about the state of the national finances. This is an attempt to soothe us so that we fall completely asleep while they mismanage the economy until the crash comes and we wake up and go, what happened? And they'll be blithering on, or else they'll leave the country for some lucrative post abroad. It's terrible. And yet we tolerate this. We don't say, I want something called Budget 2025 that has that summary statement of transactions on the first page, followed by an apology for having lied to us during the campaign about the deficits they were going to run. And then an admission that the reason that we're spending so much and we keep spending more and we keep borrowing is we have no idea how to control this thing. We spent years in many cases pursuing a career in politics, but we never studied governance, and we don't understand how it works. We don't know why Brian Mulroney tried to control the deficit and failed. We don't know why Stephen Harper, who was a libertarian when he came in, ran deficits that were so big that we thought they were shocking until Justin Trudeau did worse after telling us 3 small deficits, then balanced budget. We don't understand why people are failing in other countries to balance the budget because we know nothing about budgets, and we therefore are unfit for our jobs, and we resign. What else can they say when what they promise and what they deliver are so absolutely radically different? I mean, they get up there and like, oh, well, this is a transformational budget and we're building Canada. What's building Canada? Canada's already here. See, I'm in Canada. I'm standing on it. How could I be if it weren't built? It's just, it's this weird, trendy gibberish. And they look so pleased with themselves while they mismanage our affairs and deceive us about it.
Yeah.
So as I said, I hate budgets, hate them.
You understandably so. I saw the finance minister, Francois Champagne, people call him Frankie Bubbles, saying, "Oh, everybody can just sleep well at night tonight." Who?
Yeah, this is the guy who gave billions to EVs, saying this is about what happens in the next 100 years, and then in the next 100 days, the thing folded up, right? How does this guy get the idea that he's good at what he does? How does he get the idea that he understands this stuff? Why does nobody say? Oh, here's another one. This is from his foreword to the budget. The world is changing profoundly and in real time. We are no longer living in an era of calm, but of significant change. And so I'm looking like, when is this era of calm? The 1930s? Do you think they were calm? The 70s? The early 80s? After 9/11? And changing in real time. When did the world change in false time? You see, I mean, this doesn't even resemble thought. And he's up there, blah, 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 and he has no idea. That's the sad part. Like I talk about them deceiving us, and they do lie a lot. But on the big picture, they're not kidding us. They're as confused as they seem. It goes on, mainstreaming advanced methods. What? You don't know what that means. You couldn't possibly explain that. It's just like bluffing us in an undergrad essay, or government itself must become much more productive by right-sizing, cutting red tape and wasteful spending. Yeah, they've been saying that for 60 years, and they've never gotten anywhere near the mark, and you don't know why. You don't even know that. You think you're the first person who ever cared. It's preposterous. We're going to make generational investments that will build our country. We will protect and transform our strategic industries, build a stronger economy, and invest in ourselves.
You know, this sounds, speaking of almost 60 years, not quite, but this sounds a lot like the first Trudeau of let's build, let's have government do everything. Let's have us involved in absolutely everything with taxpayers' money to boot. And we wound up in a debt spiral. And then his kid came along and in 10 years doubled the national debt. It was astonishing, truly astonishing. But yeah, and I had Dr. Robson, call me naive. I was naive. I had this little tiny sliver of hope that the guy, Carney, with his PhD in economics, was going to be better than the dude with the silly socks, with money. But he's not. How is he not? Why are we back at the first Trudeau? It feels like we're going to be digging out of this hole for decades, the same way we were kind of trying to do in the late 80s and 90s. Like, are we just repeating history again here?
Well, yeah, because we don't pay any attention to it. I mean, I don't think he was particularly naive, but of course, everybody hoped that Carney would be the adult in the room, and he ran as the adult in the room.
He did.
But then again, if you looked at his record, right, he was a bad central banker who thought he was a good central banker. You know, in England, they nicknamed him the unreliable boyfriend because he kept changing his mind. When it came to the one practical thing he was meant to do, set the interest rate, he was frivolous, mistaken, and unreliable. And other than that, you know, if Mark Carney's got this gigantic brain, Why didn't he say to us, in the last 40 years, we have learned that there are certain things government does not appear able to do well.
Yeah.
That's been tried over and over in lots of countries. I've been flying around. I've been in those countries talking to their important people. And I can tell you what governments don't do well and why they don't do it well. But have you ever heard him say one word of that? I mean, I agree. It's not just that they think government can do everything better than the private sector, that any dollar that finds its way from your wretched pocket into the glorious purse of the state will be far better used. Remember Chrystia Freeland, we can't afford not to. That was her mantra on everything, because she thought every dollar of government spending, even the stupid stuff, gave us back at least, $1.10. Whereas when you go out and spend money on beer and popcorn, it's just gone. And Carney, it's not that he thought about this and got it wrong. He's never thought about it. That's the terrifying thing. These people are not secretly having deep thoughts, even malicious ones, the conspiracy theorists about Davos. No, Davos is a place for self-satisfied people to babble platitudes and mistake them for wisdom. That's what happens there. And then they come home and do the same thing. I mean, what's Carney done since he became prime minister? He's flown around babbling platitudes to the Prime Minister of Iceland and other such luminaries. He hasn't sat at his desk looking at spending proposals and going, no, that one isn't a good idea. Or even, it's a good idea, but not today. He doesn't sit at his desk and make decisions. He flies around exchanging verbiage with people. And because we let them, right? Again, don't forget, this happened because we vote for these people. And I agree that the alternatives are often worse. I was just commenting about the United States, right? Obama's so bad, people elected Trump. Trump was so bad, they elected Biden. Biden and Harris were so bad, they reelected Trump. Trump was so bad again, they've just elected Mamdani. Nobody should be proud of this in any party. Pierre Poilievre has serious shortcomings as a leader. He doesn't seem to have grown up. His response to the budget was, well, they say talk is cheap, but not when a Liberal finance minister does it, which was a half-funny gag in a model parliament in 1980. Where is anything? I mean, I quote this, my favorite incident of all time in politics is Benjamin Disraeli saying of his rival Lord John Russell that if a traveler were informed that this man was leader of the House of Commons, he might begin to comprehend how the Egyptians worshipped an insect. And these people had real serious discussions about real serious issues. They didn't always get them right.
Sure.
But it was a bunch of grown-ups trying to think things through and sharing with the electorate what they thought. We have nothing like that, and we don't get it. Again, I'm sorry, but the fault isn't in our stars. We don't ask for it. We let our school system not give children in English class one single book from the canon of English literature over 4 years. And then we say, oh, there's an education crisis. I guess the government should spend more money. No, the government should spend less money. We should privatize the universities, right? We need to start thinking differently about what we do. And the politicians will follow us, but look at this budget. They are not going to lead us. There is nothing in that budget, like right sizing and, cutting wasteful spending. This is the old paper clips argument. There are no programs, there are no significant programs that they think are just a bad idea, that government shouldn't do it, can't do it, or both, and they should get rid of them. And I've been asking that question of conservative politicians for 25 years, and none of them can think of anything. It's preposterous. Who's saying repeal the Canada Health Act? Not even the Conservatives. Mm-hmm. Maybe Max Bernier would say it, but he'd be the only one. And then we complain and we grumble. We say, oh, those politicians, they're no good. Well, don't put your faith in politicians. And as I've said before, one of the things people need to do, especially this floor crossing reminds us, put your money, your effort, and your hopes into building the conservative infrastructure like, Juno News or the Climate Discussion Nexus. Politics is downstream of culture, and people in this country give millions to conservative parties who then produce Doug Ford or Aaron O'Toole, or Bob Stanfield, or this floor crosser. Don't give them your money. Give us your money, because we really believe in the principles, and we will change the climate of opinion in such a way that you actually get better government. Don't wait for us to hit the wall. Do something today.
Dr. Robson, I want to leave on this note, and you mentioned earlier about history and Europe and all that fun stuff. Did I wake up in the 19th century where Europe was the manufacturing superpower and we should be cozying up to them? Why am I reading through this budget and seeing all sorts of squishy language about aligning ourselves more and more and more economically with Europe. Like, you can love it for its history and our culture and all that other wonderful stuff, but like, did they suddenly become an economic and manufacturing powerhouse that we need to be dealing with more closely? Like, can you explain why we're trying to economically align ourselves more there?
Well, you mentioned Trudeau Sr., and of course, this was one of his signature plans. We will diversify our trade away from the United States. 40 years later, his kid's trying to do it. 50 years later, Mark Carney's trying to do it. And none of them have given any thought at all to why it didn't work last time. They do not read economics. I guess Carney must have read something. Maybe it was John Kenneth Galbraith. I don't know.
You
Don't
passed
think
his
it was
tests,
Milton
clearly.
Friedman or Hayek. And they don't read history, not even the history of Canada. They have no idea why things work or don't work. They have no set of examined principles, and their tacit principles are basically a load of cliched rubbish. And then again, and you can't get the Conservatives to stand on principle either. Go, oh no, we're not going near the social issues. Oh, we're not going to cut spending. We're conservative, vote for us. Oh, shut up. You're not. You're not conservative, and you're not dependable because you do not stand on the solid rock of ideas. And it doesn't even work. The Conservatives, lunging for the brass ring decade after decade and being outsmarted by the Liberals, which is not something I would boast about. And they're the Liberals sit with bad ideas, terrible policies, and these charts that are just flying through their stained yellow X and Y axis.
Dr. John Robson, historian, columnist, and executive director of the Climate Discussion Nexus. Go check out all of his videos on YouTube. And can you tell? This is why he's my favorite historian and a friend. Dr. Robson, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Always a pleasure.
Once again, go check out Dr. John Robson's work. He's got great analysis, and he has a mind like a steel trap. He remembers stuff from decades ago, which matters today, which is why reading history is important. Because if you don't know where you've been, you can't know where you've gone or where you're headed towards. That was actually Prime Minister Winston Churchill, so I can't take credit for that quote. Folks, this has been a longer show than usual because we had to do a deep dive for you on this budget. We had to tell you the truth and cut through the spin and actually deliver the numbers from this budget, which would actually take up around 5 pages instead of 498 of them. The important thing here is that you are able to tell your friends and family, no, we are not saving money. We are spending more money. No, they're not investing. They're spending more of your money. It's going to cost you more in debt interest charges. And this is a 5-alarm fire. It's shows like this that are delivered by Juno News. So if you can, please head over to Juno News and subscribe to it. Support independent journalism. Support independent media. And at the very least, please like this video on YouTube and remember to share it with people who need to know.